Hi everyone, I'm Susan Mulvihill. Welcome back to my vegetable garden. Today is an exciting day because I finally get to plant my tomatoes. Now I started them indoors from seed on April 1st, and boy is it hard to be patient until the right kind of weather gets here. And we're finally there. You know, for the last week we've been having some pretty severe weather between high winds, lots of rain, and frost at night. But I've been watching the extended forecast and it's okay to plant them now. So today I wanted to show you the unusual way I grow them and also how I support them. So let's get started. Now I'll be the first person to admit it. I do not like using plastic if I don't have to in my daily life. But here in the garden for growing warm season crops, I do need to use some plastic sheet mulch. And that's because I live in Spokane, Washington. It's USDA Hardiness Zone 5B. We have a very short growing season, and so I need to get the soil warm and have the tomatoes be as productive as possible. So on these beds, I've got a red plastic sheet mulch. It's also known as tomato mulch or SCRM mulch. And underneath it I have our drip irrigation system, and then this mulch is pinned down onto the bed so it doesn't blow away. So that's what this red stuff is here. It's not pretty, but it really warms up the soil and it reflects extra light into the tomato plants so that they're more productive. The other thing I wanted to show you is the support system that I use, and I'm standing behind it so that you can see this wire grid a little better. What I've done is I have some real heavy-duty fence posts, and they are supporting a 4-foot by 8-foot grid of concrete reinforcing wire. It's very inexpensive. You can find it at home centers, and we have used it and used it and used it over the years, and it's still in just as good a shape. So it is tied onto these fence posts for good support, and I let the plants grow up, sort of weave them into the wire a little bit. I also use some jute twine to attach them so they don't go away from it, especially if it's windy. And this has worked beautifully. I used to do wire cages, and we have some that are made from old field fence wire, and that has worked really well, but I can fit more into a bed, and that's the name of the game here. Now, if you're wondering what kind of tomatoes I'm growing this year, I'm growing some Chef's Choice Orange, which are an amazing bright orange slicing tomato, and they are so tasty. I also have one Sun Gold because I absolutely love those cherry tomatoes. And then for paste tomatoes, which we use for making sauces and salsas, I'm growing Federle and Gilberti. So each of those is a paste tomato. What that means is it has very little moisture inside it, so they're real meaty tomatoes, and that means they make a thicker sauce more quickly. I get a lot of questions about how to plant tomatoes in this plastic because it does seem a little daunting. And one thing I wanted to mention is I know that not everyone has a drip irrigation system, but you might have a soaker hose, and that's something that would also go underneath this plastic. If you have to use overhead watering or you water with a hose, what's going to happen is the water will run into the slits that I'm about to create, so the plants will still get watered. But it's really important to keep an eye on them to make sure the soil is moist enough for growing them. You can see I got a little built-up rainwater here. But this first plant I'm going to put right about here. And so what I'm going to do, I've just got some old scissors. These are not my good fabric scissors for those of you quilters out there who are watching me. And so I'm going to cut a pretty good sized slit. And I see that I've got a little volunteer weed in there. So I just kind of move things out of the way. And then I'm going to take my trowel. And I've also got a bucket. I used to just pile up the soil onto the plastic while I was planting the tomato, and that ended up making a huge mess. So I just use this little bucket here, and I'm going to dig out a hole and put the extra soil in the bucket for the time being. These tomato plants have a pretty good sized root system on them, and so I really will not need all of this soil back in the hole. And what I can do is, now that I have a pretty good sized hole, I'm just going to put the pot in there to take a look at where we're at. Okay. I'm going to go a teensy bit deeper. Okay. Let's set that aside. Now, one of the things that tomato plants and some other types of plants will do is if you bury a bit of the stem, they will form what are called adventitious roots, and those are extra roots that go along the stem here. And what happens is you get a much sturdier plant, and certainly a healthier plant, because the more roots they have, the more moisture and nutrients they can pull up through the soil. So that's why I want to plant it more deeply. And before I plant it, I'm going to take off some of these lowest leaves just to have them out of the way. I'm just going to put the leaves that I clipped off of the plant in the bottom because they can just act as a little compost. Okay, so I'm carefully removing the plant from its pot. Remember, I've said in past videos, it's so important you don't grab it by the stem and pull it up out of the pot, because that crushes the cells that need to help transport the moisture and nutrients throughout the plant. So don't do that. Okay. I'm just going to turn it a little bit. There we go. Okay, so it is officially in the hole. I'm going to take my soil and fill in around it. I'm even going to dome up the soil a little bit, just so it has plenty around it. So that's the first one. I'm going to do 5 in this bed. These are the Federally paste tomatoes. Okay, the Federally tomatoes are in now, so you can see how they're situated. I've got 2 more beds to plant. But if you've just planted your tomatoes, you're probably wondering, now what? Well, the first thing is you want to be sure to water them in well. And the second thing is to give them some liquid nitrogen fertilizer, so something like a fish fertilizer. And that will help them put on some new green growth, which is very important as they're starting out their lives outdoors. Now, with the system I'm using for supporting them, anytime that I see the plants are sort of growing away from it, I'll use some twine and tie them back in so they stay up close to that support. All of the tomato seedlings are planted now, and I even had room for a few of my eggplant seedlings to go on the ends of these beds, so we are in good shape. Now, when you're planting your tomato seedlings, if you accidentally decapitate one, don't swear, don't despair, put it in a vase of water and it will sprout roots in a few days. I learned that tip from my friend Joe Lample, and it is awesome, so you can save the day. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. I'll see you next week. Happy gardening.